Well, in California, Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Robert French was murdered last week during a gun battle with a convicted felon named Thomas Littlecloud. Now, some in law enforcement in the state say Governor Jerry Brown is in part to blame. The L.A. Deputy Sheriff's Association and other police unions say that a 2011 law designed to relieve prison overcrowding allowed Littlecloud to keep receiving bail despite multiple violent criminal offenses. Jessica Sloan is the mayor of Mill Valley, California, a very pretty place. She also co-founded the Cut 50 campaign to drastically lower incarceration, and she joins us tonight. Mayor, it's good to see you tonight, and I just want to say that I think this actually is a complicated issue, and I don't think everyone who does something wrong belongs in jail, and I think jail overcrowding is a real thing, and I recognize all of that. But it's got to give you pause.
Well, thank you for having me on, Tucker.
Well, thank you for coming. So again, I think it's a complex issue, but if law enforcement is saying that laws designed to lessen prison overcrowding are resulting in the murder of law enforcement officials, that's got to give you a reason to stop and assess whether this is achieving what you wanted it to achieve.
Listen, I think first I'm glad to hear that you and I have some common ground. And I think it's very important to say that, my heart goes out to the officers' family. I can't imagine the pain that they're going through right now. And the entire police force here in California mourning the death of one of their fellow public safety officers. This is truly a tragedy. I think this is also a real clear sign to us that we need to focus on making sure that our counties, as well as our prisons, have all of the resources that they need to actually rehabilitate people before they let them back out onto the streets.
How lame is your state that that's not a state function? I mean, the whole idea here, in case our viewers have not been following this, is the counties are now taking up the slack where the state is no longer involved. So the idea is the state prisons are overcrowded, the counties need to do their part. But maintaining prisons is really, I think it's fair to say, a state function. Is the state so dysfunctional it can't maintain prisons without having them be so overcrowded judges get involved?
Maintaining prisons is absolutely a state function, and I'm sure you know the governor, Jerry Brown, did fight all the way up to the Supreme Court, saying that he didn't want to let anybody out. But the Supreme Court did rule that our prisons were unconstitutionally overcrowded and that they were actually endangering not just the men and women who were housed there, but the correctional guards who were working there as well. So AB 109 was enacted. It was designed to move people from the state prisons into the counties. What's very, very clear from this case and others is that the counties do not have the resources that they need to actually rehabilitate people. There is wonderful programming going on. Well, but, we can get them funding to replicate some of the cognitive behavioral programming that's going on in the prisons that actually makes people think about the criminal behavior they've done and start thinking in more of a pro-societal form.
Right. Look, I'm for that. I'm for rehabilitation, and it does work in some cases. But the primary role of the state is to protect the law-abiding from the law-breaking. So the first job of the prisons is not to make the prisoners better, it's to protect the rest of us from the prisoners. And it's not doing that. But I actually have a solution to California prison overcrowding, and I'm sure you would agree with it. A huge percentage of California inmates are foreign nationals. They're from Mexico and Central America. Why not deport them?
Well, I wouldn't be so sure that I agree with that there, Tucker. But what I will say is that our prisons are full of people right now.
Can't afford, wait, hold on. If you can't afford to keep people in prison, and you can't, and so they're getting out early and murdering cops, why should taxpayers in California take up the slack to house people who shouldn't be here in the first place? I don't understand that. Why is that the obligation of California to house foreign nationals?
I think the problem is a lot more complicated than that. I think if we're looking at the resources, we can follow models that are working in states like Texas and Utah and Louisiana, where they're actually reallocating their resources instead of just housing people. They're using their resources to rehabilitate them for victim services, for crime prevention, to strengthen local government.
I get it. Those are all great. That's all great, and I'm for free ice cream and ponies for everybody. But if you can't afford to keep people locked up, dangerous people, like California, for example, won't tell us, the public, what percentage of its inmates are foreign nationals. Why is that? Oh, I'll tell you why. because illegal aliens are a massive political bloc in California, and they've got politicians in their pocket, and they're being protected by politicians. But why shouldn't I, as a native Californian, have a right to know what percentage of the prison population is not American citizens?
There are lots of people who are in prison. Some of them are undocumented. Some of them are not. Some of them are U.S. citizens. But I think we need to be using this moment not to focus on the percentage of foreign nationals who are incarcerated in California, but to focus on how we can actually bring people home in a manner that makes our streets safer.
No, but okay, I get it. I get it. But hold on.
I'm in favor of
but why
public
shouldn't I?
Let me finish.
I am too. But no. But why shouldn't I know that? It's a really simple question. What percentage of the prison population is illegal? Like, why are we paying for them? Just get out of our country. You're illegal already. Like, why shouldn't I be able to know the answer to that question? Why are you hiding the numbers from me? That's a fair question, isn't it?
So I don't work for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, but what I can speak to is the fact that our criminal justice system is failing to actually rehabilitate people. And we know that there are smart solutions out there that are being employed across the country and across the state of California. We have a model prison here, San Quentin prison, where there's rehabilitative programming going on. And I'll tell you something very interesting. You were talking about nonviolent versus violent offenders. I recently learned that of the 700 people who committed violent offenses as youth who have been released in the last 3 years, not a single one of them has gone back for a violent act. In fact, only one of them has gone back at all, and that was for a drug violation. So 700 people who have received rehabilitative programming and cognitive behavioral programming have actually come home and not ended up committing more crimes or creating more victims, but become leaders in their community.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I wrote a book on this one. I mean, those numbers are so... That would be the most effective rehabilitation program in the history of the world. If that's really true,
I'm happy to show you
it should be replicated everywhere.
I'm happy to show you the numbers for the folks who came home under SB 260 and 261. And I'm happy to share with you the data that both conservatives and progressives have adopted that shows that programming works.
You just solved the age-old question of human sin. I hope you did. Mayor Sloan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.